get Nico help too.
He's dead. He's dead.
We are talking The Devil's Door, directed by Chris DeFranco. And this is a found footage movie that I actually watched online on the ITN Movies YouTube channel. And it's only a short movie in the fact that it's only 50 minutes long, not including credits. So relatively kind of short running time. And it tells the story of two journalists who essentially are doing a story on people smuggling from the Mexican border over to America. And the kind of female journalist, who's our main character, she has kind of ended up having somewhat of a relationship with this kind of people smuggler called what they call a coyote, which is the kind of the nickname that they give these smugglers. And he kind of wants to kind of get out of the game, and so he's agreed to do this kind of like one last job and takes them on a kind of like a run. But they go to a pickup spot that they haven't gone to before, and when they're there, there is this kind of tunnel that kind of clearly kind of goes under the kind of the border. That's all kind of gated up, and there is a woman trying to get through. But she doesn't seem to be alone. There may well be her husband behind her, but he seems to have something wrong with him, and it looks like they may well be possessed. Now, obviously, things get out of hand, people die. What'll happen? You have to watch the movie and find out. Right, so let's talk about what I think works in this movie. So it's a kind of a found footage movie, and because obviously our main characters are both journalists, it kind of makes sense for the kind of the concept of this movie. I will say I think the movie starts off pretty strong. I kind of liked the setup, because it does seem these two are kind of going on this this kind of little bit of a dangerous kind of expedition. And we know journalists kind of put themselves out there in kind of war zones and things like this, and kind of put themselves in harm's way to kind of get stories and kind of get a big scoop and things like that. So I think the concept is quite believable in that kind of that sort of manner. When with the initial meeting with this coyote, who seems a little bit grumpy to say the least, again I thought was all pretty good. And I will say I think the acting across the board here was good. I think everyone kind of made kind of believable kind of characters. We obviously have on location shooting in this kind of like these desert areas. It's kind of like these kind of brush areas and things like that. And it looks pretty authentic, and it's obviously shot on location, and that all kind of works well. And this kind of this gate, this door that they found, again, it looks pretty menacing. And their setup is quite interesting. Obviously, there's something kind of like that's happened in this kind of tunnel that's affected these kind of like Mexican immigrants that are trying to kind of get out, and we led to certain kind of conclusions ultimately that end up in bloody kind of fashion. So I thought the idea here was relatively kind of solid, and because it's only a shorter film, I mean it's not a short, it is 50 minutes, so ultimately you could arguably say it's a very short feature, but it kind of runs at a good pace because of that. What doesn't work with this movie, there's not a lot to it, if we're being completely honest. It really is. A couple of journalists go to this kind of like people smuggling place, and then there's something wrong with these people. That's kind of it, I mean, there's a couple of things that happen, but there's not a huge amount of story in this, if we're being honest. I have to be honest, once we kind of get these, past the initial kind of setup and into kind of like the actual, these couple of people that are coming through this tunnel, one of which may well be possessed, I kind of lost interest a little bit, I have to say, because it becomes very much a kind of generic kind of found footage movie, and what we kind of see on screen are just people with blood on their shirts and things, and blood on their face. It's really not particularly kind of like anything you haven't seen before. Really nothing kind of groundbreaking in kind of, I mean, it's a low budget film, but I it's just a kind of people with blood on their face and stuff. It's not all that particularly kind of like interesting. I think it could have been a little bit, either a little bit more macabre and kind of drawn that out a little bit and kind of given us a little bit more kind of mystery, or it kind of maybe could have, you know, just kind of dialed the nozzles up a little bit to give us something a little bit more interesting to kind of look at, you know. So there it is. The other thing I have to say, despite the fact that I kind of quite like the acting, our female lead is a quite unlikable character. Throughout the whole movie, she like does the literal opposite of what everyone asks her to do. You know, she's got her boss on the phone at the beginning of the movie. She's kind of avoiding his calls and things like this and fobbing off. You know, the kind of the coyote, the people smugglers telling her to go, don't get involved, you're just here to kind of watch, stay out of it. Of course, she doesn't listen to him. Her cameraman saying, like, let's get out of here when there's clearly danger. She doesn't listen to him, and ultimately, you know, things don't go well. So she's a very unlikable character, and not once does she actually kind of heed the advice of those people around her, but she's in the position of being our point of view character, the person who we are meant to root for. And when someone is just kind of like blatantly kind of doing the opposite of whatever is suggested to her every single time, it kind of makes her hard to kind of root for, to be honest. I mean, this movie, as I say, is a 50-minute film, so it doesn't outstay its welcome, but I actually think it could have benefited from having more to it, because it is a simple story with not really much bells and whistles. And I've got to be, I think the setup's pretty good. I think the setup here is an interesting idea. I mean, maybe they could have kind of gone into the tunnels or something like that to make it a little bit more kind of interesting. But the actual horror elements here, I felt, are too kind of like vague. We don't really kind of know what's going on. I mean, we get the idea here. The visuals are, I think, are on the weaker side in regards to that kind of stuff. And, you know, it ends up becoming, despite having, I think, a very good setup, it ends up becoming very formulaic once we kind of get into the kind of the second half of the movie, where I feel it just kind of loses any identity and kind of becomes people running around in the kind of the desert with running away from people who are all bloodied up. Not all that interesting. I think it's a well put together film, but I think there could have been more to it. I think you know, and like I said, this lead character is a problem for me. Not badly acted, I don't want to stress that, but just I think maybe poorly written, or at least we needed to have someone else a bit on screen a little bit more, because I feel this doesn't elicit a lot of sympathy. I will say this kind of lead character and her journalistic integrity, I feel, you know, is in question at times, if we're being honest. So, how to rate this movie? It's well put together. You know, it's a decently put together movie for what is clearly a low budget film. I think the budget was around $10,000, so it's not a massive budget, but I think there could have been more done with it. I'll give it a 5 out of 10 because I understand it's a very low budget movie. I always tend to give it 4, but I'll give it a 5 because it is a well put together film, and I think the idea is strong. The first half is strong, but it just isn't great after that. 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.